Good evening, everyone. My name is Claudia Cackler. I'm the Executive Director of the Iowa Architectural Foundation. We're a nonprofit that started 30 years ago, and our mission is to share the joy and understanding of architecture with the public. IAF improves the quality of life in Iowa through educational programs, including architecture tours, a summer camp for kids, lectures, and special events. You can learn more about us by visiting our website, which is listed in the chat box, or from the goodies we're going to be sending you tomorrow in a virtual swag bag. Please share any comments and questions you have in our chat box. We'll try to answer everything you ask. And be sure to stick around to the end and to share with other guests on this Zoom. It's my pleasure to welcome you to our celebration of architecture and the renovation and reuse of the Edna Griffin Building. Joining me this evening is Tiffany Johnson, the producing artistic director of Pyramid Theater.
Good evening, everyone. And might I say happy Pride to my friends and neighbors of the LGBT community, and happy celebration to my Black brothers and sisters as we approach the Juneteenth celebration coming up next week. I am so excited to be here with you all this evening and honored to have Pyramid be asked to collaborate with IAF on this amazing project. Pyramid was founded by myself and 6 other of my closest friends and colleagues. And because of the world we live in today, I can't imagine moving forward without saying their names. Ken Matt Martin, Jeray Breon Holder, Alexis Davis, Nana Coleman, Claudine Cheatham, and Freddie Fulton. Our mission at Pyramid is to provide a gateway to the arts for the Des Moines community by illuminating the presence of Black artists in the theater canon and to provide a means for their artistic expression.
Let me tell you a little bit about how this project came to be, and our collaboration will make more sense. As I said, IAF conducts downtown walking tours for the public, and the Edna Griffin Building is on a lot of our tours. Every time I went by the building while it was under construction, I thought to myself, this is a great opportunity. Let's share with others the way that buildings tell stories and how they act as artifacts for our shared history. I thought, wouldn't it be great to demonstrate to people the intersection of where this building and its stories meet, and to visit the physical site where Iowa's civil rights hero Edna Griffin made her stand. By demonstrating that connection, my hope is that it can be a catalyst for IAF to increase our offerings to a broader community. I can assure you this building's story around civil rights inspired its new owners and the architects, builders, and artisans working on it. Now it'll inspire the people who live and work in downtown Des Moines with artwork throughout the building and now outside of the building. And that will remind them of Edna's accomplishments and the work yet to be done. Edna's son, Stan, was a classmate of mine at Roosevelt High School. And luckily, he was in Des Moines when I started working on this concept. So we met for breakfast, and he told me his family's story, and he shared a plethora of photographs and articles about his mother that he's collected throughout the years. I learned so much from that conversation. I'd gotten to know Tiffany around some of the plays she's directed. Absolutely fabulous plays. With her tremendous vision and connections, I felt she was the perfect creative director for this project. So we started what some might think of as an unlikely collaboration, but one that I think both of us can say was extremely fruitful and fun. When we began to plan our gathering for April at the building, little did we know that the event we worked so hard to make come to pass was not to be due to COVID-19. We had to put our performers' and guests' best interest ahead of our own plans. That's how we came to meet here in this new virtual space. This was a new landscape for both of us, but we were not to be deterred. Thank goodness our original partners, the State Historical Society and Iowa Department of Cultural Affairs, swept in and filmed the architecture tour for posterity. And Tiffany took on the role as artistic director into the new world of virtual, bringing a cadre of amazing talent with her from the Black community. Our hope is to share this program with kids around the state so they can learn and retell the stories this building brings forth. We want to inspire them to find their own stories in their own buildings, in their neighborhoods, and around them.
Both Claudia and I really got to think outside of the box on this project for more reasons than one. It seems as time passed recently, the significance of this project, the structure, and the history here became more and more apparent. Claudia and I both knew that continuing this project was imperative, as we have felt the effects of what we're facing as a country currently. And Miss Edna Griffin's legacy and voice is more reflected right now than I think I've been able to see in my life. Miss Edna was vocal about Black rights, yes, but also she was vocal about human rights. And her beliefs are very reflective of what I see today in June of 2020.
The building renamed in Edna Griffin's honor has an amazing story to tell. On July 7th, 1948, Edna, with her one-year-old daughter and two friends, were denied service at Katz Drug Store counter. She was upset that they would take her money and their patronage, but they wouldn't serve her, and she was not going to stand for it. So Edna became a key player in two successful lawsuits brought against Katz. She was involved in organizing boycotts and protests and spent most of the rest of her life fighting for justice and human rights.
What an incredible woman she was, Claudia. And it's been such a rich experience for me to be involved in this event, not only for my time with you, but because of what I've learned, who I've met and worked with, and how I myself have been affected by not only the time that we're living in, but the people and the things that are a part of that journey.
I feel exactly the same way. Okay, so let's start to share some of this journey with all the viewers we have online with us tonight. We first want to start with a virtual tour of the renovated building, which, by the way, is on the National Register of Historic Places. We were so fortunate to get project architect Andy Lorenzen with RDG to conduct this tour for our audience. I think you'll agree he does an amazing job of taking us through the space and how it's evolved over time. So sit back and relax for your virtual architectural tour.
I'm Andy Lorenzen. I'm an architect with RDG Planning and Design, and we're standing outside the Edna Griffin Building in downtown Des Moines. The original architects were Foster and Levy, which was a Des Moines firm in the late 19th century, and the owner was Martin Flynn. He was, his bank, the People's Savings Bank, was on the first floor and the main tenant. He was still the owner in 1906 when the building was remodeled and added onto. Originally it was a three-story building, retail and commercial on the first floor. Interestingly, it was a vertical addition. The third floor was removed, and then the top four floors were added. The building is a reflection of that period of the commercial development of Des Moines. And really, it's a national story that ties in. The third through sixth floors are detailed a lot differently. They're reflective of a different architectural idea. They're reflective of a different period in American architecture. It's kind of interesting to note that the 1880s addition relied much more on load-bearing masonry and cast iron construction. And then by the time you were in the 1906 era, you were using steel construction, and the detailing was much more simple and reflective of a more modern kind of attitude about commercial architecture. So in the Great Depression, 1929, banks all over collapsed. This bank was no different. In the subsequent years, the Katz Drug Store, which was a Kansas City drugstore, expanded their operation to Des Moines and became the main tenant here. They added a diagonal entrance here at the corner. It was a very successful business, and it even became a large regional drugstore with like 40 locations all throughout the Midwest, into the Mid-South, and all the way over to Colorado. Katz Drug Store is an important part of the story of the Edna Griffin Building because although Iowa had an existing law on the books since the 1880s that prohibited discrimination based on race, there still was Jim Crow in Des Moines, and Katz would not serve black people at their lunch counter. In July of 1948, Edna Griffin, 2 other men, and her infant child sat at the lunch counter and asked for ice cream and soda, were denied service, and subsequently picketed and put out leaflets and eventually went before the Iowa Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court confirmed the decision and confirmed the law that was already on the books, and the law became subject to enforcement across the state of Iowa, which interestingly, this is like a full 6 or 8 years before the bus boycotts and before the national civil rights movement gained steam. Over the years, different things happened in here. But the main remodel of this space was due to Katz, and that included like a lowering of the first floor down to sidewalk level, removal of the bank vaults and all the bank trimmings. Katz used the entire north half, and it also had this kind of big storefront presence, but just a ton of signage, and like the building really transformed during that period. Come and Go found the space and decided to make it their sort of first proof of concept for their new idea, which is a walk-up gas station focusing on fast and healthy food with no gas. And so Come and Go, coming back into this space, is really a return to the main historic use of the space, and also is, I think, a bellwether for a revitalization of downtown Des Moines. I also love that use on the first floor for the tenants, because the project is an adaptive reuse. It's been an office building, 6 stories of office space for 115 years. And now it's a story of commercial, a story of a business space, and then 4 stories of residential apartments. If you live in that building, if you're a tenant there and you have access to a fresh food, coffee place on the first floor, it's a very urban experience, and I think a huge amenity. And so I was really happy because I thought that it sort of rounded out the programmatic use of the building in a way that made it a lot more compelling and attractive to people. I felt like we were able to preserve the historic character of the building and restore the use, show it more in its historic organization with the storefronts. I really like the use of the rich light material. I feel like it's a kind of a very contemporary and neutral expression of the historic goals. And I really like the apartments. The layout of the apartments utilizes the huge windows and the great views of downtown Des Moines, but also is adapted to the small footprints that were typical of, speculative office space in the early 20th century. And we were able to take advantage of those windows. And I'm also proud of the south 2 spaces off of 7th Street, because we were able to reestablish the historic entry pattern to those spaces with recessed entries. I think that those are going to be a really viable commercial space. They're already rented, and I think it's going to contribute to the streetscape in downtown. We kept, as much as we could, those elements like trim, like the window trim was extant mostly throughout the building, so we kept that. We put replacement windows in on the north and west facades that were very close to the historic profile. The Part 2 reviewers at SHPO made sure that we measured and understood and selectively demolished and found the right sizes and the sight lines. So we went to a lot of effort to make sure that we were putting back materials that were appropriate for the building. We kept the original windows that were on the south and east facades, which are a metal wire glass window that's really common to buildings of this vintage. And they're so durable and so good that usually when you find them, they still work. And the other thing that we were able to find, which I think is really cool and turned out great for the building, is that the arched glass on the second floor. When we found the building, those openings were all covered on the outside by metal, and on the inside, the ceiling had been dropped such that you couldn't see them. So we didn't know what was there. More than half of them had the original glazing in place, and so once the ceiling came out, we were able to strip the paint off of those and replace it where we needed to with similar textured glass. But that textured glass is there to kind of pull light in, and it is a great effect that we were able to keep. The fact that this building is now sort of recharged, and we might get another 50 or 60 years out of it before we have to do another big remodel, I think that's the part that excites me the most.
Wow. Thank you, Andy. That was such a great way to start this evening tonight, as so many people have never been in the space before and may have never really known its true significance. Through this process, I developed more of an understanding and appreciation of preserving architecture, the significance of having your name on a building that once didn't even let you sit in it, and the fact that it's being presented at an event called Everyone is Served means something, Claudia. At any time I forget my strength, I have a place I can walk to, a building that I can stand in front of to remind myself visually that there is a lot worth fighting for. I can touch the building that contains the stories like Miss Edna's and so many others that have passed through them. Remember the restriction and the freedom from it. It's drawing strength from the structure that symbolizes the fight of a different time and space and encourages you to continue. This building now speaks to the message that there are victories we have won and can continue to win that will represent our legacies. They speak as a reminder for those of us affected still today by racism. We right now can make significant changes to affect the legacy of our own families. We can right some wrongs in ways that can impact the future.
You are so right, Tiffany. It speaks of hope and how wonderful that we don't have to just read about Miss Edna's stories, but we can come to the very space where she stood. There are so many stories this building will tell, hundreds, I'm sure, but today we're focused on Edna's. We were lucky enough to catch up with some people who knew Miss Edna Griffin and the family well. These people also became very important contributors, activists, and involved in politics of this state in a way that would make her very proud.
You're right, Claudia. We will hear first a few comments from Miss Mary Campos, who has been a resident of Des Moines for a long time and is a long-standing activist in the state. She's an inductee in the Iowa Civil Rights Hall of Fame and the first woman to be on the Iowa Civil Rights Commission. Miss Mary has volunteered countless hours in her community and has helped serve as a liaison by representing the interests of her community with undying passion and true exemplary leadership. She personally knew Dr. and Mrs. Griffin and has a few comments that we'd like to hear from her.
When I was in my senior year at St. Joseph's Academy, I was going to be graduating, and we were at Riverview Park, and there was a little incident there. The nuns thought I had broke my ankle or done something to my knee, so they rushed me to Still Hospital on 6th Avenue. They took me to the emergency room, and there was a young man there. His name was Stanley Griffin, and he was interning, and he said to me, "Girlie, now that you're going to graduate, what do you plan to do?" I said, "Look for a job, you know." And he said, "Well, I'll tell you what, I've got 2 more years here. Before I become a doctor, I'll be residency, and I'll be done in 2 years." And he said, "If you haven't found a job by then, you know, come and look me up." And I said, "Well, I will if I'm not married and don't have a house full of kids." And he kind of laughed, and he said, "Okay," and he told the nun, "She's okay, it's just bruised, and she'll be all right, you know." So then they took me. Well, Dr. Griffin then kind of became my doctor. I told my mama about him, and I said, "Mama, there's this nice doctor, and he's got 2 more years before he's really a doctor, but he's interning, and so I think he's nice, you know." And because we didn't have a family doctor. And so that's how we began to be a family doctor with Dr. Griffin. So in 1952, I got married. In 1954, I'd had a little attack of appendicitis, and they thought I didn't know that I was pregnant. And then I was in Still Hospital for a few days, and I kept saying to my mother, "Why don't I feel better? Why do I feel worse?" You know. And my mother said, "Well, you just need a rest. You know, you just need a rest," because by that time they found out I was expecting, and the doctor was afraid I was going to have the, you know, miscarriage, and they took a film, and I had twins. So then those twins were going to come in February in 1954, and those were the first twins that Dr. Stanley Griffin delivered. And the thing I had told my mother was how his wife had been a WAC, and she'd been in the service of the country, And down where they were in Elizabeth City, North Carolina, or wherever that was that he was working, he was delivering babies for the veterans, for the soldiers, but he could not open a practice because he was black. And so she was quite irate about that. She was angry. And they both were very professionally educated, and they deserved to have a career. She said, we're all God's children. And she said, I can't understand why we have to go through this, but we'll see. Well, by that time, she was really on fire, you know, and she had done her 1948 incident at Katz Drugstore, lobbying against them not serving her at the counter. And she was a wonderful woman. And he was a wonderful man because he tolerated a lot of things that the ordinary, common husband could not tolerate. He was a strong person and she was a strong woman. And their intent was to make things better for all of us.
I just love Miss Mary. I had the pleasure of meeting her years ago when I was chairing the Black Caucus. I always admired her and could truly feel her good spirit whenever in the proximity of her. It's true for her entire family. She raised a family of amazing givers and fighters. Her resilience is incredible. As we are in the midst of social distancing, we met Miss Mary outside of her home and made sure to maintain as much distance as possible, as the safety and health of this matriarch of our entire community was imperative for all of us. You could see her daughter coming out to make sure she was not doing too much or forgetting to protect herself. It was absolutely the display of love that Miss Mary has had for her entire community for as long as I've known. When she walked up, she was so beautiful, so regal. I admire her in so many ways.
What wonderful comments about Miss Edna and the family. I had no idea before we started working on this event that Dr. Griffin had 2 medical degrees and was a pharmacist to boot. It really makes it come alive to hear these personal recollections, doesn't it?
It does.
Hearing Mary's contribution to the story gives you another layer of awareness of how that spirit is often passed along and how it gains strength once it's shared. So moving on, we got a chance to catch up with a beautiful couple that lived in the same neighborhood, just 2 doors down from the Griffin family, Mr. and Mrs. Chuck Irvine Sr. It was fascinating to learn that the Griffin house was in a redlining district and it wasn't really fully accepted that they were going to move into the neighborhood. In fact, we learned from talking to family members like Stan that they moved into the house in the middle of the night. There was a little talk, the Irvines remembered, about not wanting unfavorable neighbors, but never once did they feel that way, and they consider Stan to be a son in their family to this day. We thought it'd be nice to meet them in this very neighborhood in front of the house where the Griffins lived, to hear a few comments from them. Mrs. Irvine is going to share her remembrances about living in that neighborhood.
We knew they were, I mean, there was a little bit of an uproar in the neighborhood, and the neighbors on the other side moved, but we honestly welcomed the Griffins in our neighborhood, and our children were friends, and we enjoyed having them around and on the street and everything, and our sons became very close friends and played across the street at the school, and I think ran around the neighborhood maybe more than they should have. I used to see Miss Edna walk down the street, and she was always so busy, and I was kind of a stay-at-home mother, so we didn't get very, very close together, but we didn't really think much about it. I mean, we didn't. I mean, they were just our neighbors like everybody else, and I just can't remember having anything but admiration for the family, frankly. And they were just nice people like the rest of us, except she was much more special, of course, because she was doing something. I'm thankful that they lived here, and I really mean that from the bottom of my heart, because Stanley has been one of the most important people in our family.
Miss Ann, she was such a sweet woman and so humble. Hearing her say, I was just a housewife. I didn't get a chance to spend much time with Miss Edna because she was moving so much and so fast. All I knew was she was doing some pretty important work. She clearly thought being a house mother was a small job. But what she doesn't know, she had to be the most important woman, and that has to be the most important job in the world. Raising a family, being the backbone of a home, every meal, bandage, heartache, and her eyes on the kids in the neighborhood. Another matriarch, and I fully have Mr. Irvine to back me on that statement.
Now that we've met a couple of people who knew Ms. Griffin and the Griffin family, I think it's time to hear from one of her very own children. Stan to this day refers to Ms. Griffin as Mother. You can tell by speaking to him the great amount of respect he had for both his mother and his father.
Absolutely.
Stanley now lives in Atlanta, Georgia, and although not able to be here in person as we had originally planned, we were able to record him talking to Tiffany via Zoom. Let's hear a few words from Ms. Griffin's son as he explains that she was everyone's mom, but she was our mother.
How's everyone out there? It's a great honor to be able to talk about my mother and opening the building today. I'm so excited. First of all, I'm so sorry that I could not be in Des Moines present to see everybody, family and friends and stuff like that. But believe me, you'll see me again. I'm an Iowan, and I just want you to know that I always consider myself that, and I will be back home as soon as I can. What I want to do first is, for my family, the Griffin family is very honored to have this honor, the remodeling of the building of Edna Griffin. And I want to say something about, my sister Phyllis Griffin and Linda Griffin. And I want to give a shout out to my extended family, because there's plenty of you out there, you know who you are, because Mother considered everyone part of the family that came in there. She wanted everyone to be warm and friendly. And I think that has passed on to the kids, even to this day. Also, I'd like to give a big shout out to the architects, to the Iowa Architecture Foundation, Claudia Cackler, for sponsoring this event. And I want to give a super shout out for you, Tiffany Johnson, for working so tirelessly to put this fabulous presentation together. And I really mean that. And as I've told you, we've adopted you. You have gone into the Griffin family. We've adopted you in there because of your drive, your inspiration, and your creativity. And I just want you to know that, first of all. So it's very real. And so we want you to know that you always have us to have your back, and I plan on working with you in the future. Who would have thought? Who would have thought that this petite woman, 75 years ago, would have all this accolade in our community? And it makes me feel so good. It makes my sisters and everyone feel good that knows her. If you have the privilege to come down to that building, when you step in there, feel my mother's presence. Think about the 1948. And this woman, this petite woman, and my sister Phyllis came from, it's amazing to me because we lived on 3rd Street, almost 3rd and University, by Mercy Hospital. Well, the last time I was there, I was in that area and drove down to Katz. If you live in Des Moines, try trekking that distance in your car, and you'll see the sacrifice that she took just to get to the building. Now, here's what's interesting. At the age of 14 years old, Mother graduated from high school. She was very, very smart. And some things I did not know is she graduated from high school and had the opportunity to go to music school. She was accepted to music college and Fisk University. She decided to go to Fisk University. And what's interesting about that, back in the day in the 30s, Black women, I don't think were supposed to be heading off to school. And I don't think her dad was all that happy, but she was so determined to see the world and make a difference. She took off. She went to Fisk University. She studied, she got her diploma. She learned fluent French. And one thing that I want to talk about, that when she was at Fisk, she witnessed a hanging close to the college. So, I mean, a lot of these things probably impacted her for her lifetime of work that you guys know right now. But I mean, she was bound and determined and had the energy, the power that I was trying to figure out what gave her the drive all of her life to, think about others and be one of the greatest mothers I'll ever know. And, when you're a kid, you don't think about the things until later. You look back and say, did she do all this for us? Yes, she did. What's interesting is the transition. All of our friends come around from the neighborhood. Janny Cannon, I'm sure she's going to be watching this. Rex, Chuck Irvines, the Irvines that you're going to hear on this tape. I used to hang out and get in trouble with her son, Chuck, and we consider ourselves family today. The Cannons, everybody, the Tinkers, all of these people, and that's the way I want it. I think it's beautiful. Even though we may have been treated a little different, my mother trained us and taught us that, everybody is very similar in nature. And so, yes, I think it's time that, well, I guess Tiffany's giving me the signal, the yank signal right now. So, but we're going to have other sessions where we're going to be talking about mother. But I just want to say I'm very honored to represent the family. Have a nice time. And the presentation is fantastic. We'll see you soon.
Claudia, one of the best parts of this project was talking to Stanley. He was a wealth of knowledge, had so many fascinating stories to tell, ones that he is often learning as he revisits friendships and talks with people who knew his family. One of the other very fortunate encounters that I was able to have during this time is connecting with veteran artists in this city whose work has been known all over the world. People like Dartanyan Brown and George Davis and Gilbert Davis Sr. All three of these men are inductees into the Iowa Blues Hall of Fame. Dartanyan, I just got to meet during this process. He's referred to as the brother of Stanley, as they're very, very close friends. Talking to him, I got such a sense of the history of Iowa and music. He was able to share screens on our Zooms that were the handwritten flyers and plans of his father, who was also a musician. He talked to me about Center Street and the rich musical history that existed here at the area's height during the 1940s and through the 60s. George and Gil Davis, that was a reunion for me, because they're my family. The meaning behind them being a part of this project with me is so significant, because they, along with my grandmother and my mom, are a big part of my childhood influence that made me want to create art myself.
That's awesome, Tiffany. Hey, speaking of Center Street, wouldn't it be a great idea if Center Street could become the focus of one of IAF's classes on architecture and history?
Great.
So many buildings with a long and important history were demolished in the 60s by Des Moines Freeway in the way that was done nationally at that time. We'd have to find some really good old photographs and some knowledgeable instructors. Maybe our guests would send us some information about that in our chat today so we could follow up. Speak up in the comments if this is the case. It's a story more people should hear, especially the young ones who have experienced only the freeway, never saw those beautiful neighborhoods that were bulldozed for the freeway.
I know, Claudia, and I remember being told about that when I was young. It's fascinating to hear how things were there and then they weren't. That was really something fascinating for me to hear as a young child. So, Claudia, here's the part that I get really excited about. It's the time to introduce the artistic piece of the night. This process, you guys, has been an honor for me and for so many reasons. With the COVID pandemic and my industry, the theater industry as a whole, has taken tremendous hits as we survive on gathering audiences together. Stepping into this virtual space was a wonderful experience for me, but it was a scary experience for me as well, as it's not my usual playing field in space. Lucky for me, I have built relationships with some of the best artists in this community. some of the best and most experienced videographers and engineers. And it was an opportunity for me to create a culmination of these artists and show what gifts together can bring about. I am so grateful for all of the artists that were a part of this collaboration, that let me drive them crazy for a couple of weeks, because I probably truly did that. But what you're about to see will show you that gifts of art are tremendous offerings to the community, and that when you get together with artists, beautiful things, really, really beautiful things can happen.
At first, it may be hard for me to write this, but then I think I serve a God that is righteous, so I might just start making moves instead of making fools. I turn life into a game, so now I'm running these rules, trying to stay up, but I'm always down. So much struggle on my face, I can't help but to frown. But with my back against the rope, I stand with a closed fist, searching through God's great book, begging him to show me my niche. A black man with a mind, so they scared of my common sense. How common is this? Dr. King in my throat, so I have to speak loud. I got bricks for legs, so I have to stand proud. I move forward with my one-person stampede. Only thing is, I don't think this world is ready for me. Words. Ugh.
Mother, mother, there's too many of you crying. Brother, 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 there's far too many of you dying. You know we've got to find a way to bring some love in here today.
Father, Father, we don't need to escalate. You see, war is not the answer, for only love can conquer hate. You know we got to find a way to bring some understanding here today.
Downtown Des Moines streets are clean again following a night of chaos. Several businesses and cars were damaged when a peaceful rally became a riot. KCCI's Tommy Clark is live in the East Village. And Tommy, what can you tell us?
Well, Ticia, the streets may be clear, but the businesses, the buildings here are still damaged. You can see the federal courthouse behind me here. The glass is shattered.
Mother, mother, everybody thinks we're wrong, but who are they to judge us? Simply 'cause our hair is long. Oh no, we've got to find a way to bring some understanding here today. Oh.
Picket lines and picket signs. Brother, don't you punish me with brutality. Brother, talk to me so you can see what's going on. What's going on? What's going on? What's going on? What's going on? I gotta know what's going on.
On all of the front doors here with security just inside because of that. Pretty much the first row of windows, just about every window has some damage.
Stockpiles to ensure regional and local preparedness for any future events. Stockpiles will have a 30-day supply of PPE for each county in the region.
Mother, mother, everybody picket lines and picket signs. Don't you punish me with brutality. Come on, talk to me so we can see. Oh, what's going on? Oh, what's going on? Tell me what's going on. I wanna know what's going on. Tell me what's going on.
The other day, I took the time to realize what's been going on. My people need the likes of Malcolm and Huey more than ever. Racial torment constantly harassing my people. When this country stands on principles of race and wealth, you'll realize it was never the land of the free. Now more than ever, my people need the likes of unity. All my black brothers and sisters, young or old, because the future is in our hands. We got to create our own lane with change, because it's clear the system has blocked off any path of us surviving in their lane. I can't stand to hear the news of another black man shot down, leaving his community, leaving his family, because the world is in desperate need of black men. Strong, powerful, and passionate is what I strive to be. So when I see what's going on, I know I have to be better for the black kids to come.
That was so beautiful, Tiffany. I'm overwhelmed by the talent represented in that video. The sheer honesty and grace of those artists. What a beautiful gift to our community and our project. I'm so happy that through our collaboration, I got to know you and meet many of the amazing artists in that project. I guess we need to wrap it up now, though. So first, before people start peeling off, I want you to know that we've reserved time at the end of our for social interaction amongst our guests. Be sure to pick from the drop-down box in the chat who you want to direct your question to. And then ask us anything. And you can talk amongst yourselves as well. Secondly, we have a bundle of resources that we're going to be sharing with you, and you'll find them in your virtual swag bag. We'll send it out tomorrow to your email address that we got from Eventbrite. Remember, IAF offers student tours, an architecture summer camp, drawing and photo contests with cash prizes for kids. And for adults, we host building tours downtown and around the state. And in our swag bag tomorrow, we'll have a free coupon for one of our downtown walking tours for everybody. One more thing, I hope we've inspired you to get out and see the historical aspects of your community and its architecture, and to speak to your neighbors and seek out your own stories. Third is my thank yous. I just want to thank my board for being forward-looking enough to take this project on as a priority, and all of our nearly 100 Iowa Architectural Foundation volunteers who keep our foundation running. We could not, this project could not have come at a more important time.
You're right.
Thank you to our partners, Tiffany and Pyramid Theater Company, Michael Moraine, Dan Bolsom at the Iowa Department of Cultural Affairs, and Paula Moore at the State Preservation Department, or SHPO. And thank you, Stanley Griffin, and all the performers who are donating their talents, and they're listed in the credits. Thank you to our generous sponsors, most of who worked on the renovation. RDG Planning and Design, Newman Brothers Construction, Forrest and Associate, Tim Ripma, Des Moines Griffin Building, Tesdell Electric, Ralph N. Smith Flooring, Come and Go, the Skold Companies, and the Baker Group. IAF and Pyramid Theater are both partially funded through Bravo. This is a labor of love.
It truly, truly is, Claudia. And I just have to say one more time, thank you so much for the dedication and time that the artists spent on this project. Special shout out to Ryan R.J. Collier and Mark Smith. You guys really put in some great work on this video. Visit us at www.pyramidtheater.org to find out what we've got coming up next. It's been wonderful to be here with you guys all this evening.
Thank you.
Good night, Claudia.
Good night, Tiffany.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody.